Today, we're jumping into a memoir that's so much more than just one man's story. It's really the story of a whole nation, Turkey, during one of its most chaotic and defining moments.
Wow, just take that in for a second. To be born in a village where birds don't fly and caravans don't pass, that's the line that kicks off this whole story, and it tells you everything you need to know right away. We're not just talking about being poor here. We're talking about a level of isolation that's almost impossible to imagine, a feeling of being completely cut off from the world from day one. All right, so let's set the scene. Act 1, A World Without a Name. We're in a tiny, remote village in Anatolia back in the early 60s, and this place, it was so disconnected it might as well have been on another planet. It was a world shaped entirely by what wasn't there. Think about the things you and I just assume will be there.
For starters, no electricity. Your whole life basically run by the sun. When it goes down, your day is over.
Then, there's no running water. Can you imagine? Every single drop had to be carried, a back-breaking job, day in and day out. And get this, no roads. The outside world wasn't a place you could just go to. It was a rumor, a story you'd hear.
But the real killer, for a family of farmers, they had no land of their own. And that, right there, was a life sentence of poverty and hunger. Just inescapable.
So when you're in a situation like that, what's the escape route? For a kid hungry to learn, there's only one: school. But here's the thing. School wasn't some safe haven. It was a battlefield. A place where the path to knowledge was paved with a kind of casual cruelty that could just shatter a kid's soul.
Listen to this quote from a mother confronting a teacher. Zara's head was split open with a ruler. Are you not a mother? Are you not human? That is just brutal. And what's so wild is that this kind of violence was normal. It wasn't some shocking, rare event. Getting beaten by a teacher was just considered part of the curriculum. It was so bad that a lot of kids just dropped out, completely traumatized.
So how do you survive that? A system designed to beat you down while you grab onto any little spark of hope you can find. On one hand, you have this constant fear, this routine punishment. But on the other, you have these glimmers of light. Our narrator had one teacher who actually saw his potential and lit that fire for reading. And when his family's power got cut, what did he do? He went outside and studied under a street lamp. It was that raw determination, that sheer will, that got him through.
Okay, let's fast forward a bit. He's a teenager now, in the city of Kadirli, and he's still fighting to get his education. But to pay for it, he has to get a job. And let me tell you, this is one of the most unique, kind of bizarre jobs I've ever heard of. He basically became a professional destanji, a seller of sadness.
So what on earth is a destanji? Well, it's a street performer who sells these things called destans, basically tragic ballads, stories of murder, loss, and pure sorrow, all printed on cheap paper. This is just a brilliant window into the economy of grief at the time. Before TV, before the internet, these guys were the news anchors of tragedy. They were literally selling sadness for a living.
And the business model was genius, in a way. Here's how it worked. First, you'd record one of these tragic ballads onto a cassette tape. Then, you'd hit the streets with a tape player and a microphone, blasting the story for everyone to hear. And once you had a crowd hooked, crying, completely wrapped up in the story, you'd sell them the printed lyrics for 25 kurush. It was pure emotional street marketing.
And the titles say it all, right? The cruel brother who killed his own for 500 lira. The young man who turned to stone while attacking his mother. These stories were designed to be as heartbreaking as possible, because the sadder the tale, the better the sales. It's fascinating. A simple street corner would just transform into this public space for collective grief, all centered around these ballads.
So while he's out there on the streets selling these small personal tragedies, a much, much bigger tragedy is brewing across the entire country. His own personal fight for an education is about to collide head-on with a national struggle for the very soul of Turkey. The whole country was coming apart. This brings us to the 1970s, a period of just absolute political chaos in Turkey. You had this intense polarization. Right-wing nationalist groups on one side, left-wing socialist groups on the other, and they were literally at war with each other. This wasn't just political debate, it was street violence. Things got incredibly dangerous, with major events like the Taksim Square Massacre and the Marsh Massacre. Political violence just became a part of everyday life.
And this quote really captures the mood. The city of Adana is called the Texas of Turkey. Everyone was locked inside.
This is the world he's trying to get a university education in. A world where your friends are being murdered, where you yourself have to dodge death threats and assassination attempts. He says he barely escaped with his life on several occasions. Just surviving the day was a win.
So against all of those odds, he actually does it. He graduates, and he gets his first post as a teacher. But where do they send him? To Erzurum, a city that was a major stronghold for the right-wing factions he'd been opposing. I mean, you can just feel the tension. For a young guy with known leftist views, this wasn't just a career move. This was like walking into the lion's den. This was going to be his biggest trial yet.
And the bus ride to get there? It was like a journey through a land of trauma. He describes this woman on the bus, just casually talking about the Marish massacre. "My son, our neighbors were killed. They threw the bodies in the creek." The way she says it, so matter-of-factly, it just shows you how deeply this violence had seeped into the fabric of society. It was a brutal welcome to the new reality he was stepping in. And sure enough, trouble finds him. In this super politically charged town called Hunnes, the smallest thing explodes into a massive incident. The reality? He catches a kid blowing cigarette smoke through the classroom keyhole. That's it. The kid gets scared, runs, falls, gets a scrape. But the accusation? That he, the communist teacher, brutally beat this student, causing injuries so bad they needed a 20-day medical report. The story was completely twisted to be used as a political weapon.
And from that one lie, all hell breaks loose. Oh, and by the way, the student was the son of the local right-wing party leader. So this launches a full-on persecution campaign. He's arrested. An angry mob tries to lynch him. He's smeared in the national newspapers as a dangerous communist. He gets physically assaulted more than once. They even shoot at his apartment in the middle of the night. It was a systematic effort to break him, to drive him out, all because of his perceived politics.
So after all of that, being attacked, nearly killed, his name dragged through the mud, what lesson could you possibly take away from that other than just pure bitterness and anger? You'd think that's where the story ends. But no. Right in the middle of all this darkness, something completely unexpected happens. A moment of profound humanity that would go on to define the rest of his life.
And where does this lesson come from? Not from a friend, not from a mentor. It comes from the father of the boy he was accused of beating, the man who had every reason to hate him. And this father, who happened to be a high-ranking military commander, calls him in for a meeting. And instead of threatening him, he says this: "Never ever shame a student in front of their friends. Don't involve their families. Never forget this." Just, wow, an incredible moment of grace that cuts right through all the political poison.
And those words, they stuck with him forever. He carried them for the rest of his career. This whole traumatic experience, this thing that almost destroyed him, it gets transformed. The student's story becomes a lesson. And that lesson becomes his life's entire philosophy as a teacher. He realized the most important thing you can ever teach a child has nothing to do with books. It's about protecting their dignity. So what does this all leave us with? This incredible memoir leaves us wrestling with a huge question, one that feels more relevant than ever today. In a world that feels so full of violence and division, where do we find the courage to teach humanity? Because if this story tells us anything, it's that sometimes the most powerful, most revolutionary act isn't loud or violent. Sometimes it's just a simple, quiet lesson in kindness.